Welcome to Fostering Parenthood. This is a space to hear from other foster parents firsthand about how to support your foster youth with their healthy sexual development. I'm Dorothy Daniels, and I've been a mom and a foster mom for over 42 years.
Hello. I am absolutely excited to be here. I'm really glad that I can be here to lend my lived experience and expertise. Also, hi, hello. I should introduce myself. My name is Patrick Gem Gabbett. I am a bisexual, non binary trans man and a former foster and homeless youth. My pronouns are he, him, and they, them, whichever one.
Oh, thank you for that introduction. I think there's just so many caregivers out there that want to be as supportive as they can with our LGBTQIA plus population. And so many of those kids are in foster care. And, speaking from myself, there are just a lot of I get really nervous, right? Because I start
Mm,
to think, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I use the wrong pronoun? What if I don't say transgender, trans male? What if I say a
mhm.
person who is now,
Yeah.
I'm just never quite
It
sure how to honor
mhm.
someone in their space. And I was hoping we could just have this really just kind of that transparent conversation about what's okay and what's not
Yes,
okay.
absolutely. So one thing I want to frontline is that, while it's, like, definitely very important to, like, learn and make the effort to use the correct terminology and respect your LGBT youth, intent is, like, the number one thing. Like, it can be
Mm.
hurtful to, like, hear the wrong pronoun, to be, like, misgendered, to, uh also to, like, maybe hear, like, some, like, outdated terminology and feel, like, a little bit like, "Ah," but a lot of the time, like, I will promise you, like, people can tell that you're trying, and that matters so much because so many, like, especially, like, youth who've been in care have already struggled with, like, adults just not caring at all. So, like, they can kind of tell, like, "Oh, yeah, no, like, you are making an effort," and I prefer someone making a very genuine effort to somebody who's only doing, like, things because they feel they'll be punished, but, like, doesn't actually support LGBT youth. But, like, yeah, no, it is very I'm really grateful that we're having this conversation because it is a very, um, unfortunate fact that LGBT youth are a lot more likely to end up homeless or in foster care. Um we've seen a resurgence in reactionary violence recently, especially targeting LGBT youth and people who support LGBT youth. They act like being gay or bi or trans like is something that you can't be when you're a kid. That only groomers support them, only people who are like morally corrupt support them, and this has just been especially even for youth who have already dealt with a lot of difficulty in their life, this is just a really dangerous and scary time. And it means that adults who are willing to support LGBT youth are just, and like when I say LGBT, I mean, like, gay, trans, bi, queer, the whole gamut. LGBTQIA plus is like technically the full correct terminology, but if I like just shorten it to LGBT, like I promise that that's what I mean. But,
Is it
yeah,
is
yeah,
it
even
not is it not offensive to use one term versus another? I mean, if I wasn't to spell out the whole, acronyms,
yeah,
is that offensive?
I don't really think so. It's also just it's a bit of a clunky term. I feel like as long as people will get what you're saying, honestly.
Mhm.
Like, I will say that much because but yeah, no, being being a foster youth was already difficult enough for me, but being a queer foster youth was just even more difficult. Unfortunately, my family wasn't necessarily super overtly supportive. They weren't violently homophobic, at least, but they just kind of had an idea of just push it to the side, like, this doesn't matter at all, but also it's just not something for your age sort of feel to it. It was just a very I didn't feel very accepted and I didn't feel very safe in my environment. I didn't
Was
even come out as trans until I turned 18, and I finally found was able to get my own apartment because I just did not feel safe or secure being able to confide that into my old foster family, who unfortunately
wow.
also did just was in it for the money, got rid of me when I turned 18. It was a struggle. I really wish I had had a supportive family because that would have changed a lot. I might have been able to transition earlier. I might have been able to embrace my full self earlier.
For those caregivers that have a heart,
Mhm,
to help kiddos come,
mhm,
really with this struggle and with kind of trying to figure out in their life who they are, right?
mhm,
How can caregivers support our youth, whether they're, in a time where they haven't really discovered who they are yet and they're just kind of trying it on?
mhm.
Um, how can we support those youth?
So one thing I would definitely say is like a lot of people are worried like, "Oh, this might be a phase." And like here's the thing. A lot of the time it isn't. But if somebody does think like, "Oh, maybe I'm gay," and then realizes later that like they're bisexual, like that isn't necessarily mean like, "Oh, it was wrong for them to like try out thinking maybe I'm gay." It you should support your kid because like when you're in especially like a young adult, a youth, even a preteen, like you're in a very transformative period of your life and you like don't really like you're trying to figure out who you are. And in a lot of other ways, like a lot of youth like might like figure out try to figure out like who they are in other ways. So like and sexuality and gender are something that is very intrinsic to who we are. It's something that affects pretty much the rest of our lives. Like me being bisexual means that, like, my life partner could be male, female, non-binary, any kinda gender.
Is gender your sexuality? Can you define those for me?
No, actually. So, gender and sexuality are actually 2 very, they're terms that can, like that, of course, affect each other because sexuality is the gender which you're attracted to, but gender in and of itself is actually, it's something different. So gender and sex, like we see like sex as the physical like state of like being male or female or somewhere in between. Intersex people also exist and they're a lot more common than people realize.
Mhm.
Um and gender is like more of a mental and social thing. It's the status of like what you are, male, female, non-binary, some kind of combination, um, both like mentally and like socially, how you present and what is like in your brain.
So
Um,
could I be a female
mhm.
but present socially as a male?
So yeah, you could be you could be physically like for example, I am a non-binary transgender man. Physically, I was assigned female at birth. Although I will also say this, sex is a lot more complicated than people realize. I've been on hormone therapy, testosterone, for 4 years now, and I actually now have a lot of the same physical traits as a male of my age, like somebody who was born male would have. Like, I have the same, like, types of, like, heart attack risks. My
Mhm.
alcohol tolerance has changed because of the physical changes. But yeah, no, I was assigned female, but
Okay.
socially and, mentally, like, I present male. I, like, identify as a non-binary male specifically.
Can you
Non-binary
define non-binary? Thank
I
you.
can, I can. So
Thank you.
non-binary is a term that like a lot of people are a bit confused about, but it's basically an umbrella term for anybody who is not fully male or female. Some
Okay.
people who identify as non-binary might consider themselves to be a combination of male and female. Some people who
Okay.
identify as non-binary might consider themselves to be not male or female at all. For me, I consider myself to have a connection to manhood, and I want to be like a strong and gentle man. But I also don't consider myself to like fully be a man. I kind of like am in that sort of gray space, which is why I consider myself to be a non-binary man.
I think you
It
have the best of both.
Yeah, no, I actually for me personally, I like have really benefited from realizing that like I didn't have to just choose male or female. Because originally when I came out as trans, I thought that I had to like choose one or the other.
Mhm.
And then I also thought like, oh, well, maybe I just have to only be non-binary and be strictly not male or female. And then realizing that there was an option to be kind of in between was really
Mm.
nice. There's a
There's no
lot of
box,
different
right?
Yeah,
There's
there's no
no
box.
there's no box.
It's a whole gender is like this whole spectrum of different things that people historically even, I'll just say this, a lot of people think that this might just be some newfangled
Mm.
thing where kids are trying to be special and stuff. Historically, in different cultures, there have been different genders. There have been, different, genders throughout history. I won't go on a history lesson because we have, limited time, but you can look up, like, historical, like, different genders, gender roles. Um, it's all but this is just a different extension of that really in our
Right.
culture.
What
Um
what are those tools that caregivers can, that we can really not just hear about, right? But
Mhm.
actually create a home, a safe space. But when I say home, it's even better than a safe space. It's a safe
Mhm.
home
Yeah.
where the children in your home, the youth in your home actually feel that they can be anything and anyone and be loved and accepted and honored and valued.
Mhm.
What are those things that we can support our caregivers to really help them with understanding what these kiddos are going through.
So, one of my first bits of, advice will be to try to create, like, an ambiently accepting environment. Don't make random homophobic or transphobic jokes. If something comes up about LGBT rights, like, express support. Make it so that because a lot of foster kids are very traumatized, especially LGBT foster kids might feel like they can't even come out to their caregivers because they've been hurt before. Like, even if you are a fully accepting person, a gay foster kid who was gay bashed by his previous like, by his biological family or his previous foster family might not feel safe coming out to you even if like you have the best intentions. So what you want to do is you want to create an environment where kids feel safe to come out. I will even just say this like my dad, my biological dad who I've reconnected with is actually very accepting of me being like a bisexual and transgender person. However, when I was growing up, he would just sometimes make very casually homophobic jokes. He wasn't a homophobe, but he would just say stuff like, as silly as like when Tony Romo was being a terrible quarterback, he'd just call him Tony Homo, stuff like that. And I just couldn't risk it. I had no idea whether my dad would react poorly or good to me being about like at the time like I was still questioning my gender, but I didn't quite know I could be trans, but I knew I was bi.
So
And
can I take that a little
mhm,
bit further and say,
mhm,
so other than the fact that those poor jokes, right,
mhm,
made you feel that you weren't safe, um,
mhm.
what does he do now differently that makes you say he is accepting?
Well, he's very thoughtful and he makes sure that he like doesn't make those like off color jokes, but he also is like very like he will like talk about like being like he'll like share stuff on Facebook about like protecting trans kids. He has a P flag profile picture on his Facebook right now. He'll like just he's made it very clear that he is accepting of LGBT plus, people. He's made it very clear that, and one thing I think I really want to also tell, very, prospective foster parents who, maybe think they have an LGBT kid who hasn't come out to them, is make it so that you are being supportive, but also be careful to not, try to pressure your kid to come out, because some kids aren't ready to come out. Um, and they might react very poorly even if you mean well, if you are trying to, make them come out. They'll
Wow, I
come out
never
when they're
thought
ready.
about that. I never thought about the fact that you could go both ways, right? You could go
Yeah,
like one extreme or the other.
yeah,
It's almost like step back and make sure that they
mhm,
know that you're supportive, but not in,
yeah.
you know,
Obviously, it's so much worse to be, a violent homophobe, but
right,
also if you're
right.
being too enthusiastic about being an ally, especially a lot of these kids might, have had experiences where they came out and it was okay at first, but then things got worse.
Mm,
So they're gonna be very cautious.
mhm,
Um, and it can also be a bit scary because, we've seen in Texas, families who are affirming their trans kids are getting prosecuted, they're
mm,
getting attacked by just not just legally, but also just, socially. Some trans kids might be scared that even if their foster parents are accepting, that they might get taken away from their foster parents by,
mm,
because they're it's just you can't there's so many different factors. So you just have to be there and be ready for your kid when they're ready to come out. And when they do come out, be like just kind of listen to them. The number one thing is to listen to your kid and to take their feedback and to be there for them how they need you to be there for them. Um
Patrick, what if you've got, you're a foster parent,
mhm,
this child came to you, they didn't identify LGBT
mhm,
as part of their community, and then they start to develop those, kind of thoughts and thinking,
mhm.
I question, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts for a caregiver if you really it goes against what you believe personally, right? For whatever
Yeah.
your belief system is. No one wants to be a homophobe, right? But
Mhm.
it's just the way you were raised or whatever. What are your recommendations for those caregivers so that they can still do the hard work, right? Still heal a child, still
So
love this child?
one thing I'm going to definitely say is if you want to be a foster kid parent, you need to be ready for your kid to be gay or trans, or
Mm,
bisexual.
mm,
You need to be ready for that because you can't stop them from being LGBT. That's something that is just inherent to us.
right.
When I was, younger, I, kept trying to, what if I could just be straight and cisgender? Also, cisgender is the term that refers to somebody who is not transgender. Like, you would be cisgender. You were born female, and you identify as a female, so you are just a cisgender woman, versus
Thank
me,
you.
who is, a
Mhm,
transgender, non-binary man. Um, but when you have kids, you need to be ready for them to be different. And it can be difficult if you have either religious beliefs or maybe even not even just religious, but you're thinking, I don't want my kid to have to face these difficulties. You're
mhm,
scared. But let me tell you, this is just kind of how we are. You need to be ready. You can't stop them from being gay or trans, and you can't change them. So you have the options of either not accepting them and severely damaging their mental health. There are so many studies out there that basically show that if you use a trans kid's name and pronouns and accept them, their suicide rate drops dramatically.
mhm,
So I'll also just say it's just if you want to not harm your child, you have the choice of accepting them or not accepting them. And it can be difficult. It can hurt because you've been taught all your life, this is how to be loving. I can't enable this sin. And I know that some people might be thinking that right now, might be thinking oh, you got your sin enabled. And I want to tell you this, honestly, I can even just plead to you, like, so many, like, even religious LGBT youth, like, tried to pray away being gay or trans, and it just doesn't work. What works is being ourselves and being accepted and thriving. And if you're not you're not ready to have a kid if you're not ready to accept that. And there are so many beautiful, like, religious, like, I actually, like, there's, like, churches that are LGBT accepting that you can, like, look into even. Just when you have a kid, you need to be ready for that kid to be your number one priority in life. That supersedes pretty much everything else.
I
And
agree. I agree. There's no personal agendas here, right? I
yeah.
mean, our agenda as a parent is to
Mhm.
raise a child to the best
Mhm.
that they can be, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're changing who they are.
Mhm.
It's encouraging them to be the best that they can be.
Yeah. And, like, I really encourage, especially parents who are, like, struggling maybe with faith or maybe with, the idea of, like, "Oh, like, I don't know if I can do this." Like, look up stories like, Leela Alcorn. She was a transgender girl whose parents tried to force her through conversion therapy. They tried to restrict her access to being able to talk to her gay friends, and she killed herself.
Yeah.
It's been years. When I was in high school and I was questioning everything, like, I wrote an article about her, and she, like, she killed herself, and she left a note basically begging parents to accept their kids because conversion therapy doesn't work, none of this works. The only thing that works is accepting your kid, and if
Mhm.
you don't accept your kid, like, they could end up like her.
Mhm.
Like
And I'm gonna have a my name is Dorothy Daniels, and I
mhm,
sucked as a parent early on. And I have a daughter, and well, I have 6 children, but my
mhm,
daughter came to me when she was 16, and she said, "Mom, I'm gay." And I said, "No, you're not."
mhm,
And it caught me off guard. I didn't see, kind of signs, or maybe I didn't
mhm.
want to see them. But that was 10 years ago, right? Oh, well, it was over 10 years, almost 15 years ago. How time goes. And I'm not proud to say that, but what I am proud to say is that over this, almost 15 years journey, I
Mhm,
have come to love my daughter. I have come to
mhm.
love her wife. In fact, her wife is more like me than any of my kids. We shop together.
Mhm.
I I just can't encourage parents of faith, or for whatever reason, that they believe, that they know best, right?
Mhm.
In this particular, area, that they open their hearts before they open their minds,
Yeah.
because the beauty that I see in you, Patrick, the beauty I see in my daughter, the peace that she
Mhm.
has to give to others has just exponentially,
Yeah.
grown.
And I can understand, like, because your reaction was, like, slightly different than, like, a lot of very typical homophobes. It was more so just, like, a lot of parents do think they know their child very well, and, like, and here's the thing, you do know your kid, but also sometimes, especially if your kid doesn't know how accepting you'd be, they'll purposefully hide things from you.
Mhm.
And also, like, yeah, no, like, your intention was something very, like, different than a lot of other people, like, some of the more typical, like, oh, like, religious motivated stuff. It was just like, I think I know my daughter that well, and also I don't want her to have to deal with, like, the discrimination of being gay. And I know
And
that
that was it. I thought
that's
that it was the
so
tough road, right?
yeah, and that's terrible. Here's the thing, and I won't sugarcoat it. It's a lot harder to be, like, gay or bi or trans or, like, than it is to be a cisgender heterosexual person. It is harder. It's going to make your life harder, it's gonna make your kids' life harder, but it's also not something that you can change.
Right. Right.
It's also not something that, like, is going to go away. So you have the choice of either, like, honestly, taking, like, the coward I don't wanna say coward, but it's a little bit of the coward's, like, the easy way out and being like, "Oh, no, you're not gay. No, you're not trans," like, and just trying to push that away, push him back into the closet. or you can stand up for your kid. You can show that you are a parent who
Absolutely.
loves your kid, and you can show up, you can, like, support local, LGBT youth organizations, you can take your kid to places, you can support them, and I'll also say this, there's a lot of fear-mongering about trans kids. Look at my little Protect Trans Kids shirt. There are, like, people saying that kids are getting, like, genital surgery, that it's, like, this horrific thing that they're, like, getting their lives ruined, and, like, I'll say this, when there are, like, young trans kids because there are some trans kids who, like, realize that, like, there are, like, little kids who are just like, "I'm not a boy, I'm a girl," at the age of, like,
Mhm,
6, and,
mhm,
like, you know what you do? You change the pronouns you refer to them by, and you
mhm,
let them choose another name if they want it. Like,
mhm,
and you let them dress up how they want, and that's just the
mhm,
very basic thing, you just let them socially transition,
mm,
and if it is just a phase and they say, "Okay, I'm going back," okay. If it continues to close to puberty, you do puberty blockers, which is a very actually very safe, proven method that has been used for people who have either precocious or dangerous puberties for years.
mm,
And there are long-term studies that show that it's fine. Um, when the kid becomes like a mid to older teen, they might start on a low dose of HRT just to give them the same puberty that they'd have as a cisgender kid. It's completely safe. It's scientifically proven, and like it's just I think a lot of cisgender people are kind of scared of the idea of like, oh well, what if they regret it? And like, there's a very low rate of regret. Also, if the kid if there is regret, look at me. I went through female puberty, and guess what? I got it fixed. Look at this. Like, it's just one of those things where it's just like there are so many trans kids who are suffering right now and not being
mm,
affirmed because, like, and also some trans kids also are just will not want puberty blockers or HRT and just want to socially transition and will
mhm,
like start hormonally transitioning when they're older and adults. Like, it's complete like, all of the only things that are happening to trans youth are things that are medically safe, that doctors have been talking through, and that parents can talk to the doctors about. It's and for the most part, it's really just a new name and pronouns and maybe puberty blockers if, like because I actually, like I know a couple who has a kid who's on puberty blockers right now. She's doing awesome. She's so happy. I've seen her thrive. If she were forced off of those, she would be suffering right now.
mm.
Like, I'm so happy to see her get the opportunity I didn't. And I want to like tell like these like foster youth or foster parents like you have the opportunity to give these youth a childhood that I was denied.
Wow,
And I wish I could have grown up as just a little boy. I wish I could have done that. Like, and I was denied that.
I'm so
And
sorry.
sometimes, yeah, like a lot of older youth, like a lot of older like LGBT people will look back and just kind of be like, for trans people, it's just kind of like, I wish I'd had the boyhood or girlhood I was denied, or like I wish I had been like even just like childhood I was denied. And also even for gay people too, it's like maybe not as like overt, like oh I wish I was like, but it's like I wish I could have had like my because like you start having crushes when you're so young. It's just kind of like I wish that, like, my crush on my best friend was seen as, like, as normal as, like, a boy's crush on a girl's best
Right,
friend, or, like,
puppy
I
love,
wish
right?
I yeah,
Yeah.
or, like, even in high school or middle school, I wish I coulda taken my date to the prom.
Wow.
I was actually very lucky, and I was actually able to take my girlfriend to prom.
Mm,
Um, there are a lot of, like, gay people who I know who literally, like, just weren't able to be open about dating, or they weren't able to,
mm.
like, the harrowing experience of introducing your boyfriend or girlfriend or, like, partner to your parent when you're, like, a teenager and being like, "Oh god, I hope that they're okay with it." It should be like it should be the same as, like, a straight kid introducing their boyfriend or girlfriend.
Right, that's
It's like
scary enough, right?
right? And I'll also say this, have like equal standards for
Mm,
your gay kids and straight kids and bi kids, for your also asexual kids. I haven't mentioned that very much, but Asexuality is where you're just not attracted to anyone. There are
Right.
kids who are like that. There
Yeah.
are adults who are like that.
Mhm.
But also your trans kids and your like cis kids have like similar standards because like for example, if you have like a straight daughter and you're just like no sleepovers with boys, you better also say for your gay son, no sleepovers with boys. Like one of the like instead of
Absolutely, right? I
or
mean,
or 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 if you're okay with your straight daughter having sleepovers overs with boys, you better also be okay with your gay son having sleepovers with boys. Don't have a double standard. Um,
I love that. I love that because it is tempting and I think it
mhm,
gets confusing for caregivers, parents, where we're like,
mhm.
"Well, what about the locker room?" What if you
Yeah,
have a
mhm,
gay son who
mhm.
plays football
Yeah.
and, it really kind of
Yeah, I'll say that, like, as a bisexual person, I guess I'm, like, never allowed in any locker room. Honestly, it's just look away. Just don't be a pervert, just look away. It's fine. Like,
Well, and
it's
and then we're talking too, I wanted to make
mhm,
sure that we talked a little bit about, making sure
mhm,
as a caregiver that you're familiar with the needs of your child.
mhm,
That, for instance, if you have a trans male
mhm,
and they haven't had hormone therapy, they haven't
mhm,
had the advantages of some of those
mhm.
things that are available. Binding,
Yeah.
right? How
So, but
what does
yeah.
that mean, right? What
I'll
does
say
that
that.
mean?
So binding is the process of like binding your chest. Like never do ace bandages. That is so dangerous. It's a lot like safe sex. I'll also just say this. Like binding is not sexual, but I'll just say this. If you tell your like kid they can't bind, then they're gonna bind and they're gonna like do it unsafely. So you gotta just be with them and help them. Binding is the process of binding your chest
Okay,
to create a flat chest.
okay.
Some people can just do it if they have small enough breasts, they can do it easily with like sports bras. But there are also professional like binders that are created for the purpose of binding your chest.
Mhm.
You shouldn't do it for super long, like, maybe, like, there's a safety amount of, like, how many hours a day you should do it. Never let your kids sleep in their binder. I know it's tempting, dysphoria sucks, but, like, that is bad, and you should not do that. I used to do it a few times, and, that did not go well for me.
What
But yeah, no,
happens? What happens when you sleep in your
it
binder?
can hurt, it can, like, cause rib pain, it can cause,
Okay,
like, lung pain, it can, like, cause issues with that part of your, like, chest. Like, right now, I'm actually
absolutely.
wearing this, like, Tomboy X, the thing at Target, which is not this is not a full binder. This is basically a sports bra that can help, like, compress it's a compression top.
Okay,
A binder is, like, you can look it up, like, it's just something that just can make your chest look especially flat. And it can be a very good like thing to help like a trans boy or like a non-binary person who has chest dysphoria um reduce their chest dysphoria before like having top surgery. And you can just look up safe binding practices and like
yeah,
buy your kid a binder that is safe because
and
there
that
are
isn't that
organ
a is I'm sorry,
yeah.
but isn't that a way, kind of going back to that support piece?
Mhm.
By just being willing
Yeah.
to do the research, buying a
Mhm.
binder is a way of saying, "I support you.
Yeah.
I
It's
sup"
so
no
the
pun
idea
intended, right? Get
no,
it? Support. Yeah.
if I had if I, like, had been like, had a parent who would buy me a binder, that would have been, like I would have cried. Like, I've seen
Yeah.
pictures of, like, parents, like, buying their, like, trans kids a binder, and their trans kid, like, has, like, the biggest smile on their face. They're like, "Oh my god, look at this. That's so amazing." Like, it's just, like it's so wonderful. But, yeah, going also, like, pivoting into, like, safe sex, I'm just kinda like, here's the thing. People like talk about, "Oh, like, we shouldn't talk about sex ed," like, thinking about, like, sex, well, like, regarding minors is, like, preferred, and I'm just like, sex ed actually helps kids stop being groomed, like, it helps kids know, like, what grooming is and actually get, like, not, like, be willing to be like, "No, get away from me."
Can you tell
Um,
me what grooming is? Sorry.
oh, grooming. So
Ignorant.
this is actually a big so grooming is the process of, like, an adult basically trying to get a minor to be, like, willing to have sex with them.
Oh,
It's
that
a
okay,
very
that grooming.
dangerous like,
Okay.
yeah, it's a form of sexual abuse,
Okay.
and a lot of people basically will act like supporting LGBT kids is grooming, which I'm just like, no, no, it's just literally just support. Um, but grooming is also like, yeah, it's something also that you have to be very thoughtful about with like having kids, especially kids who've been in foster care, because sexual abuse is very common. And there are
Mm.
a lot of LGBT kids are unfortunately more likely to be sexually abused because like of various factors of they're more likely to generally be abused. They're
Mhm.
less likely to feel safe talking to adults about stuff, and also so like especially for like gay kids and stuff, like people might think like, oh, like I can fix them by forcing them to have like it's just a very, unfortunately, sexual abuse is a thing that happens, and it's very common in foster kids, like foster.
Absolutely.
So also being willing to be careful with your foster kids, because also I'll say this, some people might think that people become gay because they were sexually abused. So many straight kids were sexually abused, and they weren't like sexual abuse does not actually change your orientation, but it might
Mm.
make it difficult to interact with your orientation or to talk
Oh,
about even just having sex. Like
interesting.
there's a
Interesting. You have more,
mhm.
fear, right?
Yeah, a
More.
lot of fear. Like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, like I like there like a lot of like young like lesbians might have been like sexually abused by a man and then are just like, does that mean that like I'm not really a lesbian? Like it's just
Mm.
it's very difficult. And foster youth are subject to very high sexual assault rates.
The
Um
reality is that, at least if I'm hearing you correctly,
mhm,
Patrick, and so much great information, I'm taking it
mhm.
all in. We just need to honor each other as
Yeah.
individuals.
Mhm.
Does it
Me
really
too.
matter what what our outer body looks like? Does it,
Mhm.
if you want to look a certain way so that you feel your inner
Yeah.
person is being valued, then that's your decision.
It's respect. It's basically it's all about respect. It's like if someone named Antonio suddenly says, "Hey, I want to be called Tony and not Antonio." Like,
Mhm.
you do that.
Mhm.
If someone who used to be named Mary one day is like, "I actually think I wanna be called Mark, and could you please, like, use, like, he, him pronouns and, like, refer to me as, like,
Mhm.
a boy now?"
Mhm.
You just do that. It's just it's a matter of basic respect, and it greatly improves the mental health of these kids.
Absolutely. Is there any
And
other tools at all that you would like to
mhm,
share with our caregivers that I truly believe are
mhm.
taking notes right now and
Oh,
really
yes.
trying to be the best they can be for our kids?
So, I will say this, a lot of people have some issues, like trouble using they, them pronouns even if they want to. I will say this, they, them pronouns have been used in a singular fashion since Shakespeare. People have always
Mm.
been using if I mean, you'll always like, think of it this way also, even though it's just like, if somebody, like, lost their phone, you'll be like, "Oh, I think this person lost their phone," because you don't know who this person is. But if you're having trouble with like conceptualizing they them pronouns, there's actually a really funny story I heard where somebody was just like, I came out as non-binary, I was starting to use they them pronouns, my dad was having a hard time, and then suddenly he started doing a lot better. And I asked my dad, hey, what changed? And he said he started imagining a swarm of bees surrounding his
Ouch.
kid, and he was referring friendly bees,
Friend,
and he
oh,
was
okay.
referring to talking to the bees and his kids, so he was just kinda, like, trying to make it in his head, like, "Okay, they, them, there's my kid, and
Oh,
also
I
the imaginary
love
bees."
that because
So
I feel like my 2nd grade school teacher is like
mhm,
slapping my hand with a ruler every time
mhm,
I use that pronoun incorrectly,
mhm,
in my head, but I
mhm.
love that because now you're not just looking at the child
Yeah.
or youth, you're looking at a
You can
swarm
you
of
can
happy
yeah.
bees.
You can, like, just get yourself to, like, understand, because, like, grammar, like, language updates. Like, here's the thing, like, we change language all the time. Like,
Mhm.
technically, yes, they, them has been used singularly for a long time, but also they, them has not been used singularly in popular culture until very recently
Mm,
as much, like, more commonly. So it can be
right.
difficult to adjust your language. So using little tricks to adjust your language is fine. I mean, like, we have, like, things where we've realized, like, this word actually is very hurtful, so, like, we stop using
Mm,
that word. Like, things change, language changes, like, and times change.
I
I
love
would
that.
also definitely say, like, yeah, no, like, have the same standards for your straight kids as your gay kids and your bi kids, your trans kid. I also will say this about gender roles and gender thoughts. Don't impose gendered restrictions on your kids, even if they're not trans. That's going to be a big bit of advice for me because a lot of like feminine cisgender boys will actually struggle, even if they're not
Mhm,
trans girls, because they're told like you
mhm.
can't wear earrings, you can't do ballet, you can't stop being so girly. That doesn't just hurt trans girls. That could hurt feminine gay boys. That could hurt feminine straight boys because guess what? They exist.
Yes.
When I was a little kid, I remember my biological brother being told that he couldn't wear like stick-on earrings anymore. And I remember being so confused because I didn't really want those stick-on earrings, but my brother did. But because I was considered to be the girl and he was considered to be the boy, he was forbidden from partaking in these things.
Mm.
And it was really sad because it's one of those things where it's just like, if you don't impose these strict and rigid gender roles on your kids, not only is it going to benefit your kids if they're potentially trans, if they're not trans, it's going to be nice. If you have like a tomboyish girl, you should be supporting her enjoying boyish activities and stuff. Like when I was a little kid, I always wanted Bionicles like my brothers, and I was, like, given, like, makeup and stuff instead, and I was just like, "Oh, this sucks." Like, here's the thing. Yes, I ended up being a trans boy. If I was just a girl, that still would have sucked. Like, I said I wanted, like, these more boyish toys, and I wasn't given them,
Hmm.
and that sucked regardless of whether I was a trans boy or just a girl. Like
Wow, I can see that, right? Christmas morning is not gonna look so happy, right? If the agenda when buying the toys is the parents'
mhm.
list and not the child's list.
Yeah, you just look at your kid
Yeah.
and see what they want because, like, that's the thing that I've noticed in parenting. Like, some people are very well-meaning and they're just kind of like, okay, I'll like treat my trans girl like a girl. And I'm just like, okay, but what if your trans girl is also a tomboy? What if she like, because there are some
Mhm.
trans people don't understand the difference between gender and gender roles too, because there are some trans girls who are just like in like they were assigned male at birth, but they thrive and are happy living as girls, but they also like cars, they like, Bionicles, they like, sports, and, making them conform to feminine gender roles is not necessarily going to be very helpful for them. Um, I think that it's very helpful to just think about to rethink how you consider gender in your parenting, honestly, and, like, I'm not
Absolutely.
telling people to, like, change their whole parenting style forever, but I'm just saying, like, consider the fact that it's just like, if you have, like, a kid who you think is a boy who really likes feminine stuff, instead of discouraging them and being like, "Hey, don't be girly," especially because if you're scared that they'll get bullied. Yeah, no, it sucks that they might get bullied, that he might get bullied, but, like, instead of telling him to change himself because of society, what if you just, like, let him be himself? If he later comes out as a trans girl, you can accept that. If he's just
Let
a feminine
him
boy,
be
accept that too.
himself.
Just let him be himself. It's
Patrick, what you have shared has been eye-opening for me, not just my eye, but my heart. And the important thing is just let them be,
yeah.
right? Love them where they are.
Mhm.
Be that supportive, healing person that you went into caregiving to be.
Mhm.
Patrick, you have been so open and transparent. And I just want to thank you for being on this podcast to really open the eyes and open the hearts of our caregivers.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, thank you.